Welcome to the video 3.2 of our Asteroids project, where we're going to actually fire the laser with controls, and so then the player is going to be able to fly around and shoot lasers by the end of this video. We still won't have anything to attack, such as an asteroid, which does mean that our code for the laser won't be 100% complete, because we still at some point may need to add some stuff about colliding with asteroids, making some particle effects when it hits an asteroid. And we won't be able to make that until we actually have an asteroid to attack. So let's get the player to be able to fire the laser. So we left off, we had just turned the laser into a prefab, and I had placed a few in the world, and so we don't need any lasers in the world. So at this point, you should make sure that you don't have any lasers inside your hierarchy, and that the only lasers that are in your project are prefabs. And so now this part is going to be a little bit of a mixture of modifying the player ship so that we have a point to shoot lasers from, setting up the sounds, and then getting the script working. So let's start with configuring the player to be able to shoot lasers. So the thing is, much like how we did with the engine particles, we put a game object at the back of the ship so the particles would appear out of there. And I'm going to do the same thing for the laser. I don't want the laser to be appearing from the dead center of the player ship, because that wouldn't really make a whole lot of sense. And so I want the laser just to appear kind of out of the front end of the ship. You know, if you really wanted to get kind of specific, and I may make a extra video on this, like configuring like these little ports right here to be like lasers that alternate or something, which could be something fun to do. But this will show you the concept of creating what's called a hard point. And in a lot of games, you would refer to, like any game with like type of vehicles, you usually refer to the hard point as the point at which a weapon is mounted. And so in this case, it's going to be the point at which the laser shoots from. So with the player ship object selected, we can either do this in the scene, or we can actually edit the prefab. But I'm fine with doing it inside the scene first. So have player ship selected, and then go to game object, create empty child. And that's going to create a new game object that's part of the player ship prefab. You can see that it's not fully updated because we have a plus sign on this game object here, indicating that it is a new piece that's not part of the original player ship prefab. We'll update it all when we're done though. So with this game object, let's first make sure that this is set to local so that we are aware of what the forward axis is. And let's bring it forward a little bit. And I'm a little bit hesitant to bring it down because I don't want to drop my laser off of the 0 y-axis, because then that might make it lower and not necessarily hit asteroids where we expect them to hit at. So, so far I'm kind of okay with this location. Maybe drop it or move it up a little bit, because it is going to spawn a full laser. And what I mean by that is the laser graphic is going to start appearing here. And so that way it looks like, you know, it's not sticking out of the ship or anything like odd such as that. And so that looks like a good position. We are going to rename this to laser hardpoint. In some approaches, you could also switch. We could create a tag for it, and so we could, and I'll do that, and so we can demonstrate this alternate way to bind hardpoints to scripts. Let's just go into tags and go to add a tag, and I'm going to click the plus sign, and I'm going to call it primary. Make sure I spelled that right. Hardpoint for HP. And I'm going to hit save. So I've got primary HP. Then I'm going to go back to this laser hardpoint, and I'm going to attach that tag to it. And that's going to be another way that I'm going to show you two different ways to attach this child object to the script so that it uses this as the spawning location. And so we've got that. I guess while I'm here, while I'm thinking about tagging objects, let's tag the player from untagged to the default player tag. And that's going to be useful in some things. Like when an asteroid collides with us, it's helpful to know that this is a player object. And so this thing has the tag called primary HP. It's been renamed to laser hardpoint. And right now it doesn't have anything else on it. But I do want to put the sound effects on here. And that's because the sound effects are actually localized to where the listener is. And so if the camera, which actually has this audio listener, as you can see right here, is in the center of the screen, if my ship is over here, it should sound like it's kind of coming from the right side of your speakers. And so that's why we want to put the sound effect on the actual object that's making the sound. If we had the sound effect, if we had the audio listener in the cockpit of the player, then your sound effects would be coming from the forward side, and if we had lasers on the left and the right, you'd actually hear sides coming out of the side speakers there. But that's if down the road you wanted to kind of change how audio works in here. But I'm actually listening for audio from the main camera up in the top. And so with this, let's go to Components, Audio, and an audio source. You can actually only ever have one active audio listener because obviously you can only have one point that you're listening for audio from. But let's add an audio source. And so here is that. Let's give it the audio clip of the player. And I actually have my sound effects on for this video, so you should hear whenever my sound effects are making noise. So I think if we can sample them over if we go to the assets window, and then if we have these here, we can actually play them. There's a little play button somewhere right here. So we can hear the asteroid explode, an enemy ship. But we're interested in the player weapon right now. And we're going to use that to be our sound effect. You could very easily import your own audio clips. I don't remember off the top of my head of which audio Unity supports. I know it supports WAV files. I'm pretty sure it supports MP3 and OGG files as well. But I'm not 100% super sure about that. So this is the sound effect we want. So when we go back to this audio source, let's go pick player weapon. Double click it to make this menu go away. And so now we have a player weapon as the audio clip on the front here. This is if we wanted to have any sort of like audio mixer, which could then be tied into like a settings. So like if you wanted to have this as part of like the voices group and the background music group or the sound effects group, you'd be able to kind of independently control their volumes. And so that's what that would be for. Not going to really play with that for the purposes of this video. The rest of these, the only one we really kind of care about is this play on awake. What that's going to do is play this audio clip the moment this object becomes active in the scene. And that can be useful. If you wanted, like if we put this on the laser, if we put this audio file on the laser, then it would, the moment that laser gets spawned, it would play the audio, which makes sense. But we actually just want to play the sound effect on command with a play command. So we're going to uncheck play on awake. The reason I'm putting it here is I don't want to put it on the laser that gets spawned because that actually generates more audio sources than I truly need. And then secondly, as the laser moves, this sound effect is going to follow the laser, which again doesn't make sense because it got shot from the front of the ship. And if the laser got deleted, such as it hits something immediately before it finishes playing the audio clip, the audio will mysteriously stop and sound kind of bad because the object got deleted. So priority is fine. Volume. This is something that you may have to play with to get it sounding good relative to everything else. I am going for 0.2 for now. Again, you might have to play with that based on what it sounds like on your end. And so we have our player audio set up here on my laser hardpoint. now begins us actually having to script this to work. So return to the player ship, and let's go update my prefab. So if we click on the overrides right here, we can then tell it to apply all. Be very careful not to hit revert all. If you hit revert all, it just undoes all of your work. Then hit apply all, and you can see that that little plus sign went away on this component, and now that's blue as well. So that means that my prefab of the player, all these changes I added, was now committed to that instantiatable prefab. So let's make a script inside the... I'm not going to put it inside the weapons, because that's where I'm going to put like different weapons if I design more weapons. But up here in the player, right-click on player, create a C# script called player shoots. And push enter. And then double-click it to load it up in Visual Studio. This is the code for us shooting. And I could have just as easily put it inside of here, but there's nothing that this player shoot script is going to need to tie into from the movement script. And so I feel like it's actually easier from a management standpoint to keep it as a separate script. Yeah, I could have just made one massive script of everything, but I like this a little bit more. It kind of helps compartmentalize and componentize a lot of what I'm doing. So, let's start to code this. So we're gonna have some mouse control here, or keyboard, because we're gonna use the fire button. But let's get our variables. Now I know that I did set a damage variable on the laser. So when I actually made this basic laser script, you can see that I gave it a damage of 10. Now, I just did that because I wanted that to be a default damage, and the player is going to actually set the damage for the laser. The reason why I want the player shooting script to handle that is the player is going to be more knowledgeable if the player has a power-up that may double their damage, or a power-up that may double their fire rate, or maybe an upgrade that increases your damage by 20%. So the player is going to be more aware of the status of their upgrades than the actual movement script of the laser. So, to be fair, I could probably have just set this damage to 0, and then assign the damage upon creation, which I'm going to do anyway. But by leaving this as 10, at least that's some kind of basic behavior. And I don't want to make this private, because then otherwise I have to write a method to access this variable when an asteroid gets hit. So I'm fine leaving this public for the purposes of visibility from outside of the class. So anyway, we're going to set the damage to 10. We're going to do our rate of fire variables. So this, it's best, I think it's easier to think of it as like an attack cooldown. And so I'll set it to 0.2 seconds, meaning you can fire 5 times a second. So that's the rate at which you can attack. And so that begins a discussion mentally in your head of what is the DPS of your weapon. So if you're going to add other weapons, you should kind of keep in mind that if we're dealing 10 damage and we can fire 5 times a second, that we're really looking at a DPS of 50. So if you were to add another weapon into the game that does like a DPS of 80, and it's equally easy to use, then you might need to rethink your damage numbers. So something just to kind of keep in the back of your mind as you start to program stuff. We're not particularly super worried about balance for this project, but it could be something we should care about. This next variable is the attack timer. This is how long the player has to wait until they can attack again. So the idea is that we attack, and then we let I'm probably gonna use this as a countdown variable. So whenever I attack, this attack timer is going to be set equal to 0.2, and then as time elapses, I'm going to subtract time from this, and then once this reaches 0 again, I would be allowed to attack. And so some variables for my components. And so we need, because, oh, do I really? Oh, I do need, okay, this is going to get into a little bit of polymorphic discussion. We'll make this as a rigid body. Normally, I'd make it as a game object, but I need to have access to the rotation position of the laser. Well, I guess I really don't truly need it as a rigid body, though. So we'll do it as a game object. Now that I think about it, rotation is part of the transform, so let's just make this game object. So this is going to be a variable where I'm going to attach the prefab to the laser. And then I need to have my shot spawn point. This is basically my hard point. And so this is going to be where the laser is going to appear from. And then I need my audio source. And that's going to be that audio component on the shot spawn point that we're going to play sound effects from. And then, so I just put a little comment here to mention that this prefab of a laser, this needs to be set inside the Unity editor because we're just going to link the prefab into here. There is not an easy way to link prefabs through code. It's not really practical. There are, if you Google it, there's a lot of workarounds to trying to get some kind of code-based prefab linking, but none of them are very pretty. And so we're just going to do this manually. And you'll see what I mean in a second. So let's link this shot spawn point. This shot spawn point is supposed to be this laser hardpoint variable. But I'm going to attach my player shoot script onto the player ship itself. So we've got to hunt down that child object. So let's talk about the different ways we can link that location. So the first way, and this one can crash, and I'm not a huge fan of this one, but it's worth mentioning anyway. So the shot spawn point can be game object dot find, and we can find it by name. But here is kind of the danger of doing that. So let's hit save, and there's two big issues with trying to link this hard point by searching for its name. So let's say there's another player ship inside the game. First off, look at what it might do to the name of the components. It called it player ship 1. So that could be the first thing that throws us off. But that actually doesn't affect the child object names because they get their own name independent of the player ship 1. So the other problem that could arise is what happens if when we're respawning the player, the moment the player dies, that a new player ship gets spawned And we don't know necessarily what order that's going to happen. And the new player ship might get spawned a fraction, like we're talking like 1 frame before player ship. And so when this new ship gets spawned, it chooses to search because we're looking for laser hardpoints. We're searching, and it finds the ship that's about to be deleted. So this player is about to get deleted because we just spawned a new player and this guy just died. So it links it to a hardpoint that's about to cease to exist. And so that's one of the other major risks of attempting to link like this. So I'm going to comment it out and leave it there because it is worth at least acknowledging that that is something you can do. And it's not really something you should do. You can also search for objects with tags, and you could go through the list and end up deleting tags out the list. Well, I guess that's going to get kind of complicated if we want to do that. But we'll just link it manually, and once we attach this script, well, we can do that right now. So if we hit save, and we take our player shoot script, let's go drag and drop it onto player ship. And so we can see that now I have my player ship script and my player shoot script. But I've got this shot spawn point. And what I'll want to do is actually link, this gets kind of crazy how we want to link it. We actually want to link it through the prefab. So we'd want to double click our player ship like this to go into the prefab builder. And we can see that, I need to update the prefab. So if we go back to player ship and we go to apply all to force this script to appear, if we go into my prefab builder, we can see the shot spawn point. What we want to do is drag and drop this laser hard point into it like that. And that's going to, every time the ship spawns, it's going to link it to its own child prefab. That's probably the best way to do this, because now we can guarantee that it's always going to be the freshly created prefabs version. So we can back out of this, and then we can see that that change gets reflected here because it's inheriting all of its properties from that master prefab. All right, so let's go back to coding this. And that's how we end up linking these together. So let's start. We also then need to attach the audio source. So we're going to link the shot spawn point dot get components audio source. Now we know that shot spawn point is going to exist because we just linked it in the prefab, so it is guaranteed to exist. This is kind of a risky maneuver, but yeah. So this is going to link it to the sound player. And then inside of update, so we used fixed update for all of our physics-based stuff, and we're not going to want to use the fixed update for spawning things, because we're going to be trying to look for a mouse click, and it's possible to miss a mouse click inside of fixed update. So you don't want to do any sort of like weapon attacks or any sort of like instant frame effects. So basically attacking from inside of fixed update. The only thing fixed update should be doing is applying movement. And if we even look at my player ship back here, we actually gathered all of my input during update. And you basically never want to gather input during fixed update. You want to apply the things that you did, the input that you gathered here. You want to have those applied during fixed update, but you don't want to be gathering input during fixed update. It can cause an effect where you can click the mouse and it never actually really registered that you clicked the mouse. All right, so first off, we want to cool down the player's attack. So if attack timer is greater than 0, we're going to say attack timer minus equals time.delta time. So we're going to take away the last frame time. So this effectively works as a timer. And attack timer is going to be the thing that's going to be set to 1.2 whenever I attack to prevent me from attacking infinitely fast. And now our actual attack button. So if input.getButton fire1 and attack timer is less than or equal to 0.0f. So quick thing to note about this is get button and some of the other ones. So oops. Let's just kind of include the whole family here. Because this is important to know. We've got 3 possible methods for registering a button press. So let's talk about all these. If you have get button fire 1, this returns true continuously while the fire 1 button is held. So if you're holding down the mouse button, now keep in mind clicking the mouse still activates this for 1 or 2 frames because you have the mouse button down, you're clicking it. So we're going to report true continuously while that button is being down, even if it's only for 1 frame. If you just tap the mouse, it's still going to be true for 1 frame. Mouse button down returns true once the first frame fire 1 is down. So the first moment you click the mouse in, this is only going to report true once. And then when the button is up, return true once the the frame fire 1 is released. So that's how you can do different effects. Like let's say in a version of Asteroids, I've made a weapon that you shoot it, and then while you're holding the mouse down, it travels. But the moment you release the mouse, the projectile explodes. And so that you can register when you release the mouse by doing this. So that can be an event that can cause you to have a trigger. Another thing that's useful about like the get mouse button up, a lot of games don't actually confirm the action until you release the mouse. So like if you're clicking like a button in a menu, that button usually doesn't change until you actually release the button. And that's like if you drag the mouse off the button, it doesn't actually activate. So it's something to kind of watch for next time you're using something, is to think about, is that interface or is that gameplay that you're using going off of button down, or does it activate on button up? So now just kind of a quick thing about weapons is if we're using get button, you can attack by holding down the mouse. If we choose to do get button up, you attack by tapping the mouse. So that's something to keep in mind as well, is like whichever one of these you choose to use for your attack method, it does drastically affect how it actually plays from a user standpoint. So if you just want them to be able to hold down the attack button, you'll want to use get button. If you want them to actually have to click every time they attack, you'll want to use get button up. So that could make a difference if you want to have a rapid fire weapon versus a single shot weapon where they do have to release between attacks. So that's kind of a lengthy discussion about that. But let's spawn the laser. we can spawn it as a game object, I think. So the command for spawning something inside of Unity is the instantiate command. This functions as the new command in Java and in C#. It's kind of a lengthy instantiation command here, but what we're looking at is what are you spawning? So if I mouse over, you can kind of see it. The first command is the laser is saying, what am I spawning? What game object am I instantiating? Where am I instantiating it is this piece. You can see that's a vector 3 position. And then this is the angle I'm spawning it, which is a quaternion. So those are the 3 components of the instantiate method call. There are more versions of it. As you can see, there are 9 different overloads of it. So there are instantiate methods with different different parameters. So if you are really curious about it, you can go look up the Unity API. And so if you wanted to read more about the different ways you can instantiate stuff, instantiate is a pretty detailed list of commands. So, like for instance, we're using this one where we're giving it a position and rotation. You can apply another one where it specifies a parent, so you can kind of link something as having a parent. But yeah, so you can read more about the instantiate command. It is a pretty diverse command because obviously it's an incredibly important one. It causes things to spawn. And so what we do is we spawn the laser, and then we keep a reference to it. So then I can say temp laser dot whatever. And so in this case, let's set the damage. And this is going to get that script. So whatever you called the script, which I think I called mine, was it like laser basic or something? Yeah. So the get component command can also grab a script, which allows you to modify variables on a script. So that's something to keep in mind as well, and that's something we are going to use a lot. It's an incredibly powerful way to interact with other objects, is you just get the script and you can call methods. It is worth knowing that it is fully polymorphic, so you could call like a, I forget what those are called. You can call an interface. So you could say get component, let's just call it like, say there's an enemy interface. You could get the enemy interface, and it would get the script that is a child of the enemy, that implements the enemy interface. And if it has those overloaded methods, overridden methods, you'd be able to call those methods. So it does have kind of full polymorphic behavior that we saw in computer science with that. Again, expanding a lot what you can do with the get component command. So we're going to set the timer to the attack cooldown. So this is what causes you to have to wait until you can shoot again. And then we will play the sound effect. And so that should be pretty much everything we need. Now this is a lot of comments, but it is very, these comments are designed to kind of teach you how some of the Unity commands are actually working. So we're going to hit save here. Might as well hit save all just in case I change my other scripts. And that means this should be almost done. So we go back to Unity, and it's going to take a second. Now, we have not bound the laser yet, so I do want to show you what happens if you haven't assigned that. It'll run, and you know, it's all fine. But when I click the mouse, I'm getting this red error down here, unassigned reference exception. And that's just reminding me that I have not attached the laser. And so I'm going to go into the prefab builder of the player ship, and from there I'm going to take this player laser prefab, and I'm going to attach it to the laser. I'm going to leave the prefab builder. I'm going to notice that this has correctly bound the player laser. Hit play, and you can hear I've got my sound effects. I've got lasers. I can rotate. And so you'd be pretty much free to play with the settings all you'd want. You could do horrible things such as setting the attack cooldown to 0. And you can create all kinds of weird things. I do want to at least demonstrate my favorite thing to do with that. If you turn off the is trigger to make the laser solid. And that's because they're all colliding. Their colliders are getting stacked into each other. Yeah. So yeah, you probably want to make sure that your player laser stays as a is trigger, and that you at least have some kind of attack cooldown here. And if you don't remember what the original values were, you can always just go back to my player shoot, right click, and do reset. Oops. Right click, revert to prefab. So you can see modified component, revert, and then it's going to pull that back down from there. To clarify though, when I did reset, it actually resets the script to the default values inside of Visual Studio, which are basically that those things were not bound. The laser and the shot spawn point were not bound. So I actually wanted to go back to what the prefab had set there. And so that's going to conclude this part of the lesson. So we have a laser. And that is a good start. It's coming out of the right spot of the ship. And soon we'll start using it to attack asteroids. And so, thank you for watching, and stay tuned for the next video.